Today I have a special guest, Joe from Resomation Audio, who is new to the plugin development world, but has a background in electronics and is working on both plugins and FL Studio patcher presets, as well as hopefully releasing some hardware, some physical analog pedals down the road. We met on my Discord server, which you should join if you haven't already, and got to talking. And he's also a fan of the Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal soundtracks by Mick Gordon, which apparently is a new genre of metal called Argent metal that is pretty young and sort of still in development, but there's a community for it, and I will link their Discord below. So we're going to be talking about both his pedals and plugins, as well as what is Argent metal and what makes it special and why we're both interested in it. I would also highly recommend watching Mick Gordon's talk on how he made the Doom soundtracks and what his process was, what his pedals were, because that really gives you a good background on some of what we're talking about today. And we originally sat down and had a 3-hour-long conversation that was going to be this video, but sadly there was technical problems and Joe lost the audio on his side. His computer crashed. So I gave him a series of questions and had him record his answers on his side this time, and we're just going to have to splice it together in post. So welcome to Joe. And firstly, who are you? What's your musical background? And what is your company, Resomation Audio?
Hi, thank you for inviting me onto your channel. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Joe, and I'm the founder of Resomation Audio, which is sort of my umbrella for all of the different destructive projects that I work on. So it's like my sound design, my music production, hardware engineering, all of that just kind of fits under this one umbrella. I'm not an actual engineer. I prefer to think of myself as a sound destruction enthusiast because I don't have an engineering degree. But I did do 7 years in the Navy working on aircraft electronics down to the component level. I learned how to solder. I learned, some pretty advanced stuff going through like the training and whatever for that. So I over time, my wife convinced me to apply that to music. I was struggling learning how to program stuff. She was like, just build it. And that kind of started this whole journey. I started digging into the idea of destructive sound design and how to apply it musically right around 2017. So like right after Doom came out and that soundtrack came out, and just like it blew my mind. I saw this video on the Waves Audio YouTube channel called The Killer Chain, and one of the sections of it was titled Destructive Audio Design. And I thought that was such a cool concept. So I kind of dove into that. I've spent the last couple of years researching techniques and pedals and circuits and all kinds of stuff for the sole purpose of taking audio and mangling it so much it becomes something else entirely.
What I really like about the Doom soundtracks is just Mick Gordon's unique approach to the sound design, to this concept of using a simple sine wave rhythmic pattern and breaking it up, processing it through a bunch of different effects and manipulating them on the fly, and just a unique sound that really no one else has gotten. And some of the sounds he got in there are just so wild, and they fit this sort of metal but also kind of electronic and metallic, this industrial, like alien hellscape, dystopian future sci-fi stuff. I think it's really awesome. And he used some awesome gear. Some of those pedals, like the KV100, are really rare and hard to find. So there's cool stuff in there, though, as Mick said, it's not all about the pedals themselves, but how you use them. Another cool trick he has is layering a more typical metal kick drum sound for the faster parts, for the double bass runs, as well as a deeper, louder electronic sort of sub kick to accent different hits. So there might be 16th notes going on the metal kick drum and quarter notes on the more electronic kick drum. And that is just a cool thing that you don't really see. It's not something you can really pull off on a live kit. So it's cool to see those sort of things when you are working in the digital domain and in the world of soundtracks. That kind of sound design and layering, it really gives the soundtracks impact while also having that energy of a more metal drum sound. So what inspired you to get into Argent metal?
It's just so fucking cool. The sound alone was totally unique to me. I'd never heard anything like it. And I was writing, around the time Doom came out in 2016, I was writing progressive black metal. And it is very different structurally from Argent anything. And, I was in this really pretentious proggy phase, and it just ended up just kind of fizzling out. I put out the demo, but I never did anything else with it because I just got so absorbed in the music of Doom and trying to learn the style. And honestly, a little bit of it is that it's just that it's Doom. I played Doom 2 way younger than I should have as a child in like 96, I think. And I loved it. I've loved everything about it. The soundtrack at the time, like the connections with Metallica and Pantera and Alice in Chains and all these other bands that I was just discovering around that time, was just perfect. It was like, it all came together. And 2016 felt like it just belonged in the franchise. And even though the music was different and the aesthetic was different and the gameplay was different, it felt like it had always been there. And Mick's music felt like it had always been there. Like it had always been a part of Doom. We just didn't see it until it was ready for us, I guess. And that's really what inspired me to get into it, was the uniqueness and the sudden, like, cool factor, and also that it was Doom.
It's interesting to me and kind of funny that it took an outsider, a game soundtrack composer, to write some of the most compelling and unique metal music to come out in the last 10 years and really sort of break some of the molds and inspire a new generation of producers and composers to really try thinking outside the box more. And as much as there's a lot of variety in metal music, we do also sometimes tend to stick to what works and what has been done before. And it's always good to have someone who's willing to break the rules and push the boundaries of what is metal and what it can be in the future. What is so interesting about Mick Gordon's approach to music and sound design?
So in his GDC talk, Mick mentions the concept of Argent energy from Doom 2016, which, if you haven't played the game, is energy, power that they are siphoning out of hell and using, cleaning it up and using it as clean energy for Earth. Mick had this idea of like that hell energy going through and corrupting everything it touches. So he kind of did the inverse. It inspired him to take the two purest components of sound, a sine wave and white noise, and put them together and run them through a system that would corrupt them in a similar way. So the entire genesis of this genre is linked to the name Argent. And it makes a lot of sense that would, kind of evolve into the subgenre name. But it's more than just the doom array. In the songwriting in Argent metal, there's a focus on violent energy and aggression, groove, tension and release, heavily distorted synths. The doom array, of course, is a big part of it, but there's also guitars, and there's guitars that sound like chainsaws. And, some of us are working on insane things like using a lawnmower as a synthesizer, because, Mick did it, and now we're trying to figure it out on the back end. And I don't want to say definitively that the doom array is Argent metal or the chainsaw guitars are Argent metal, especially because the community has so many unique perspectives. There's a lot of really knowledgeable dudes, especially in the Argent metal server that I sent you a link for, are all kind of working together to build this community where we're not just making Argent metal. We're supporting each other and we're learning from each other, and we're building an independent community of artists that want to make music that rips and tears.
What are the projects that you're working on?
So I actually have a lot of irons in the fire at any given point in time. But there are two projects that I want to mention today, one of which is ready and one of which is still in its early stages, but is coming very soon. So the first one is a patcher preset and VST combo. Those are together emulate the KV100, Metasonics KV100 Ass Blaster pedal that Mick used in the Doom array. The other one is a FL Studio specific sort of deal. I'm working on getting a complete Doom array template set up, complete with routing all the controls to individual control surfaces by channel and doing a video not only on that and how it works, but also how to set it up with the Akai MIDI mix and the Akai MIDI mix extension script for FL Studio, which tactile feedback is so important in creating Argent metal because the sound always needs to be changing. It always needs to be evolving. Something needs to be moving when you're using this sort of sound design. And being able to do that with knobs instead of clicking and dragging or writing automation curves that you can't listen to until you don't know what it sounds like until you've already played it back. And you can have tons of happy accidents with knobs that you'll never get with, turning the knobs digitally. So those are the two big ones.
So let's break these projects down.
Here's my DAW. FL Studio is my weapon of choice. Go ahead and open up the mixer. And here I've got the root channel for the Doom array. This is the basic sine wave. And I've got a preamp on here to give it some smack and instance of vinyl on here to add noise when I want to add noise to the entire array. That's bypassed right now. And then over here, I've got Distox by Analog Obsession. It's just a preamp. I've got it set to op amp 3. An EQ, just there to tame the highs above 8K and clean up everything up to this point below about 20 hertz. 23 hertz. And then, of course, Camel Crusher, which I love, with a little bit of compression to give it some more transient and a little bit of distortion and a little tiny bit of filtering. Then I have this loaded in the signal chain. So this is the anal fissure generator, abbreviated to A.F.G. And this is based on the Metasonics KV100 Ass Blaster pedal. Now, it's not a one-for-one recreation of that device. That, in my opinion, would be unethical. But due to how rare this device is and how much it actually costs getting one secondhand, and the fact that it's no longer in production, I wanted to create something that was inspired by it and followed the same sort of signal chain, and then expand on it where I could and change things to suit originally my specific needs. But now there's a kind of a need for it in the Argent metal community as well. So for those of you who don't have FL Studio, please don't panic. The VST that kind of drives the pulsar section is just a VST, and you can use it in any DAW you want. And all of the mapping and everything can be done using stock or free plugins even in other DAWs. And there'll be a video coming up on my channel that really dives deep into how this was put together, what each section actually is doing, and how it all kind of fits together into one big puzzle. But for the purpose of this video, I'll keep it pretty simple. This first distort section is a dual tube preamp. So the drive control will control how much tube distortion there is. The first half is pretty normal, pretty tame. And then once you cross that 50% threshold, you start getting some really aggressive, blown out, nasty distortions, which normally are not musically appealing, but sometimes you crank the knob and magic happens. I wanted to leave that there for that level of experimentation. These two knobs are for the first ring modulator. A ring modulator takes the amplitude of one signal and changes the amplitude of a second signal at the frequency of that first signal, which is really a fancy way of saying that it makes a waveform move up and down based on a second waveform. There's a lot of math and stuff that goes into that, but for sound design, what you need to know is that you'll get some carryover from the original, from the modulation signal into your carrier signal, which is the dry signal, and it kind of gets coupled onto it. The KV100 does it a little differently. It uses a tube as a ring modulator, and that's a whole other can of worms. But again, for this and for this design, even here in the, I'm just using a regular ring modulator. And then destroy section is next. The ring mod source down here. You can select the dry signal, the internal oscillator, or an external signal which is not set up for this video, but again, on the deep dive, I'm going to go over all of that, all of the setup for it. So this destroy section is based on the pulsar VCO section of the original unit, meaning this fist knob acts as a wet-dry control, which is not present on the original hardware. And this stretch knob acts as a pulse width control, which was also not available on the original hardware. And then this pulse VCO knob and between either a full pulse signal or a full VCO signal. And you can control the pitch of the VCO here, just like you can control this oscillator over here. This width control is still in development, so currently it doesn't do anything, but eventually it will control the range of this stretch knob so that when you move to these different positions, you'll get a different range of pulse widths. So it'll be a little more versatile. That's coming in a future update. And then this last section, the diminished section, is a bandpass filter. It's a wide bandpass with a little bit of tube saturation built into it and a width control, and then a gate that's controlled by an envelope that's created in this first section. Now, that same envelope is used to create triggers for the pulsar. And what that does is every time a trigger comes in to the pulsar section, one pulse is put out. But the pulse width of that pulse is always the same. No matter what the frequency of the trigger input is, those pulse widths never change. And I could have done, a bunch of math and figured out what the time constant was in the hardware and set it up to have the exact same pulse width, but I felt like that would have been cheating. So instead I added this stretch knob that lets you set your own pulse width. You can play with it as you listen and get all kinds of different sounds. It's neat. So I'm going to go ahead and play for you a pretty recognizable riff with this off, so you get it that way first, and then again with it on. And again, this time with the KV100 emulation turned on. Let's do that one more time and really play with these controls. Things start getting really spicy when you add other plugins afterwards, like Tactical Nuke. Tactical Nuke is an emulation of the Geiger counter pedal that Mick used in his Doom Array, and it's a sound design tool I use on every instance of the Doom Array without fail at some point, because it's just so unique and cool, and I love it. So here's the riff without the Tactical Nuke. here it is again with Tactical Nuke. So this patch isn't just to emulate the hardware or to emulate a specific part of the array. It's to create a new and unique tool for people who want to get into destructive sound design to use on their own mixes in their own sound design sessions, and not just on the Doom array.
What can you tell us about your future projects, and where can people follow you?
I don't want to give away too much. I've got another VST in the works right now that I'm putting together. I'm really pleased with it so far, and I'm kind of excited to see where this goes. I'm also doing a deep dive into the Patcher preset that I demoed today on my own channel that should be up very soon, as well as just like other nerdy music stuff, hardware, preset and sound design. I'm going to be doing a series on Patcher and on Control Surface for FL Studio users who want to build their own presets, build their own VSTs almost inside of Patcher, or get involved with any of the more advanced side of routing things. And yeah, just general sound design, destructive sound design chats. So you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Resomation Audio, or you can come check out the YouTube channel. And you can also find me on the Argent Metal server. Usually Resomation Audio is somewhere in my username. It changes, but you can find me there pretty easily. And yeah, just feel free to come along and join me on this journey of destructive sound design and becoming a disciple of destruction. And thank you again so much for having me on your channel, giving me the opportunity to do this. It's been awesome.
I hope you enjoyed this interview, and I'm sorry we lost the original audio, but it was a 3-hour-long conversation, so editing it down to a more YouTube-ready length would have been kind of a nightmare anyways, and we're covering the same topics here, just in a little more structured format. So, as always, like and subscribe, and go follow Joe and his projects, and check out the links in the description to learn more about this topic, and I will see you in the next video.